William Lebov, who challenged that. And he said that there is something, and his classic paper is The Logic of Non-Standard English. And he talked about even non-standard English, whatever we call non-standard English, is quite important because it also follows rules, regulations, everything. Only thing is that we denigrate certain varieties of a language as bad, it's not enough, that kind of thing. And this is what I always called linguistic, discrimination, linguistic casteism. Now here, you say that certain, we always say, oh, ye to boli hai. Why do you say it's a boli? It's also a language. Only thing is a variety of a language. And over a period of time, one such boli has become, khadi boli has become very powerful today. There was a time when Sanskrit wasn't written. That is the reason for which we have shikshas, pratishakyas, etc., etc. How to, let's say, recite the Vedic hymns. So, that's why it's called Shruti. We used to hear and remember that. So, script is, most of the languages of the Northeast didn't have a script a couple of 100 years ago. So, script is very different from language. Why should you link language to script? And this kind of notions, the place, India is a country where the greatest kind of, phoneticians, grammarians were born, and they did a whole lot of things. And all of us can see very easily the way our, sounds, the arrangement of our alphabet. I'm not talking about the letters, I'm talking the sounds. See, first the vowels, short, long, e, u, etc., etc. Then, when you come to the consonants, again, according to the places of articulation, ka, kha, ga, gha, nga, vilar, kanthya, cha, cha, ja, jha, nya, palatal, talavya, etc., etc. So, great contribution. But what we have done is that we have forgotten completely, or we are away from that. Due to some, there is an amnesia. We have been away from that. As a result, such things are happening. Now, I'll give you, again, I'll read something. I'll have to see what is happening between a speaker and a young man who doesn't speak English very well, in the United States of America. The first one is by the person who is asking a question or talking. Asking a question. What if you saw somebody kicking somebody else on the ground or was using a stick? What would you do if you saw that? Then the hearer says nothing. Then again, this questioner says, if it was supposed to be a fair fight, then the hearer says, I don't know. Then the speaker says, you don't know. Would you do anything? Oof, I can't hear you. Then the hearer says, no. Then see what is happening. Then the speaker says, did you ever see somebody got beat up real bad? Then the hearer says, no. Then speaker says, well, did you ever get into a fight with a guy? No. Everyone says no. No, 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 no. So look, if the person doesn't understand the language very well or wants to, let's say, defend himself by not involving anything, we'll always say no. And this is what is happening. Why are we teaching the students of Sido Kanhu Murmu University students in a language which they don't understand? Who is responsible for that? Are we not responsible for that? Here, I will ask a question. Can we have the same syllabus for the whole country when there are such disparities all over? And all of us know that there are such disparities all over. And when we have such disparities, differences, and lacunae, lapses, then why are we following the same kind of syllabus, whether it is CBSE, ICSE, or whatever it is? In the state, there is a state syllabus all over. Whatever is happening should we not question that? Should we not ask whether it is good to have this kind of thing? Should we not have a debate in this country? Because we have a national education policy in place now. Now, in that context, should we not ask? There are many, many universities, many, many schools where the students do not understand the home language and the school language are different. And there is no, kind of bridge course, as it is called. And what kind of bridge course? If you talk to the bridge course, I have seen a lot of bilingual education program materials, and you will see that the first book will be in the language of the child, the mother tongue of the child, and then there will be a kind of mix of the child's mother tongue and the state language, and after that you will see, and what kind of mix, that we don't know. Then in the third year you will see that there is almost a switch over to the state language, and it happens, that kind of thing. So the purpose of the bilingual education programs, or as these they are reflect and as it is reflected in these materials, is to create, is monolingual. Philosophically, it's monolingual. The child was monolingual in the mother, let's say tribal child, let's say a Malto speaking Maler child, and we call them Pahadia. Why should you call them Pahadia? They live in hills. That doesn't mean that they are Pahadias. They are Malers. That's the name of those people. And anyway, the Maler child was a monolingual in Malto and went to the school, and in 3-4 years, he or she got an impression that Malto is not an important language, and the state language is much more important. As a result, he or she was discouraged indirectly to, let's say, talk in his or her mother tongue. And that's what happens, all of us know, in many English medium schools. I have faced that. I have gone through that because my relatives have reported that to me, and that is what happens. So we must have a kind of proper language planning. And if you cannot have language planning, nothing, then we cannot have a successful kind of education. And here we are talking about, many people talk about creating a competence in English. We are teaching grammar in order to create a competence in English among the learners. Here I'll cite something which I have never seen anybody citing this statement from Delheim's, one of the very, very important sociolinguists who is no more, who passed away only a couple of years ago. And he has mentioned, and I quote him, in a conversation in July 1968, that the difference between competence and performance was given by Noam Chomsky in his aspects of the theory of syntax, which was published in 1965. And this is something which Delheims have mentioned in July 1968. In a conversation, July 1968, Chomsky remarked that the original competence performance dichotomy was inadequate in reference to my critique of it, because Himes wrote a paper criticizing Chomsky's notion of competence, and he discussed or proposed the concept of communicative competence, which was very important. Competence doesn't give us communication abilities, and it is the communicative competence which gives us. Competence is only linguistic grammatical competence, but we have something social rules, and we must know how to behave in a society. What kind of rules? I'll give you a simple example. A lot of us know that we cannot address, we do not address somebody by first name and use "aap." I cannot, normally say, let's say, Awadesh, aap kya kar rahe hain? Normally, Professor Mishra, aap kya kar rahe hain? Dr. Mishra, Awadesh ji, Awadesh Babu, aap kya kar rahe hain? Kind of thing. We always do that. First name, whenever first name is used, it's normally tu or tum. The father, the parents, the family members use the first name and tu, tum, etc., etc. The teachers use first name, something like that. But nowadays, you see on television, it's rampant. You will see that people use first name and aap. So this is what the Englishmen do, the English speakers do. They use the first name. It's a different. See how that culture is being, you see, in a sense, assimilated in the Indian one now. And there is, it's time we probably started talking about discussing terms of address and terms of no, primarily address, not reference, how it has changed over a period of time. This is how the things have changed, and it's primarily because of some people who follow the English address rules. And as a result, what we have started doing is that we have started following the same thing in our lives, because all of us watch television channels, and imbibe all those things. Okay, now see what Delheim says. It says that, well, Chomsky himself stated that the original competence performance dichotomy was inadequate. So that's quite important. That's quite significant. And so that means it is time we started looking at all these things in a different way. And since we are now in the first phase of, let's say, the implementation or the beginning of implementation of the national educational policy, we must debate, because as Dr. Binod Kumar Jha mentioned, we have, according to 2011 census, we have 1,369 rationalized mother tongues. Now, if we are going to teach in the mother tongues till class 5, who is going to prepare teaching materials in all these 1,369 mother tongues? Who is going to prepare materials? Are there trained personnel in this country to do that? Number one. Number two, what about the 3-language formula? All of us know, because there was no discussion. I have never seen any discussion. Why the 3-language formula has, fared so poorly. In fact, I should say that the 3-language formula has failed in this country. Because luckily at University of Hyderabad, I used to teach students from almost all states of this country. And there will be some people from north, and it's called English. A lot of them, I don't say everybody. And then people from northeast and south in general will be very poor in Hindi. And now, in spite of all that, our 3-language formula, and everybody has had his or her schooling in this kind of 3-language formula, except Tamil Nadu, where Tamil Nadu even now has said that it will follow a 2-language formula. That's a different story. Now the thing is that unless we plan our languages, whether how to teach, what to teach, and how to teach English, then only we can have a multilingual India. And I repeat, I have said that India is not a multilingual country in the sense that most Indians speak 3 languages. Those people who say that India is a multilingual country, they are going by their impression, which is not acceptable. They say that, oh, this is not the ground reality. And should I believe the Census of India report or a person's impression? I have heard, 3-4 times in the recent past that, the Census of India figures about bilingualism and trilingualism do not reflect the ground realities. I mean, this is a joke. People who say that, do they understand what they are saying? And this is the best kind of survey in this country. And somebody says that, oh, it doesn't reflect the ground realities. This is very difficult to believe. Now, if you really want to make India a multilingual country, India is a plurilingual country. And there is a distinction between plurilingualism and multilingualism. And today people say, a plurilingual country is one where many languages are spoken. And India is a country which has so many languages. Yes, but most Indians are not multilingual in the sense that they do not speak 2 or 3 languages. And I have given the figures earlier, so I don't want to give, and just for mention, since the trilingualism figures among the Hindi speakers as it is given by the Census of India reports of 2011, only 1.49% of the Hindi speakers know 3 languages. That means less than 1.5% Hindi speakers are trilingual. The figures may be questioned. It may not be 1.5%. Let it be 15%. Even then, it's not a great figure. That's what I'm trying to say. We'll have to have a language policy first. We must have a language, not language planning. I must talk about language management, because planning is very different. Planning is something which is imposed from the top. But let's look at the ground realities. Let's see what is happening on the ground. Make a kind of document about what kind of languages are spoken, how people are viewing, responding to these languages, what is their attitude or what are their attitudes, etc., etc. It must be a bottom-up approach. We should do those things. Then talk about language management. Then once we have a good language policy in place, then it will be much easier for us to have a good education policy in place. With these comments, and I should close, and then I would leave the floor to other speakers. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Professor Mohanty. It was a very insightful lecture, and we are sure that the viewers would have questions to ask you. For the same, the organizers have arranged for a form, and viewers can post their comments and observations and queries, if any, in the YouTube live chat. At the end, we hope to have a discussion on all the questions that we receive. Now, we can move on to the next expert. The next lecture is by Professor Awadesh Kumar Mishra, and I am happy to introduce Professor Awadesh Kumar Mishra to the viewers. Professor Awadesh Kumar Mishra is working as Professor of Linguistics at the Regional Campus English and Foreign Languages University, Shilong, and he has received his education in Bihar, Jharkhand, Delhi. He received his master's and doctoral degree at JNU. He's a polyglot, proficient in several languages, including Hindi, Maithili, English, Bangla, Pashto, Sinhalese. He also has working knowledge of Tamil and Persian, Russian, German. So he's a polyglot person. And before I pass on to Professor Mishra, let me also inform all the esteemed viewers that Professor Awadesh Kumar Mishra worked with 3 institutions before. He was associated with NCERT and CIIL at the Central Institute of Indian Languages. He served as the director, and during his time, 2 very important projects took off. One is the Scheme for Protection and Preservation of Endangered Languages, and the other is the Bharatvani project. Professor Mishra is widely acclaimed for his work, especially in relation to grammars. He has received award for his monograph on a Dravidian language, and he has also completed various projects, and he is known for his courses, very lucid discussions on language matters. He has guided the Ministry of HRD on language issues, and it is my pleasure to welcome him to the program and invite him to deliver his talk. Over to Professor Awadesh Kumar Mishra.
Thank you, Tariq bhai. Namaskar, Johar sabko. What I'll do, I'll mute my video so that my bandwidth is not, consumed a lot, and then I'll speak. Uh, Thank you for inviting me, and I have a long association with the now the state called Jharkhand, which was part of Bihar. And I'll begin with just two, three anecdotes. One is that only Professor Minz pronounced my name correctly, and she even wrote my name correctly as it should have been, not as it is. And Professor Jha also always addresses me as Awadesh. So my name got changed in Jharkhand. I did my schooling at a school known as Jarmundi High School, which is near Dumka, near Basukinath. And since the clerks and most of the teachers were Bangla speakers, and this is how they pronounced my name, Awadesh or Obdesh. So they dropped the H in Roman. In Devanagari, it is all right, but in Roman, my H got dropped. And maybe that was a kind of premonition. They dropped it because I used to be very bad in Hindi. And even in Sanskrit, I used to fail because a lot of grammar was there. But I picked up Bangla very fast there in Jarmundi, and at that time I had very good knowledge of Santali, and also with my friends, Santali friends, I used to speak it. And since I lived for about 2 3 years at Devghar, when my father was posted at Devghar as officer in charge of Devghar Thana, in the same house with Doman Sahu Samir. So I had a lot of exposure, but they did not teach me grammar. That's why I picked up these two languages. But I remained weak in Hindi and Sanskrit, and not to talk of English, which was not there. Even the English poems and stories, they were translated into Hindi in hi-fi Hindi, which I could not understand at that age in my school. So that was really bad. But then that prompted me to become, I kind of took it as a challenge, why I'm weak in Hindi and why I'm weak in Sanskrit and English. So I mastered that on my own without learning grammar. And how I did it? That was by talking to the people who were proficient in these languages, be in the company of the proficient speakers of these languages, English and Hindi, and only read and listen in Hindi and English all the time. This is how I mastered these two languages. And then I don't have a degree after higher secondary in Hindi, and I have only a certificate of proficiency in Urdu. But my first job after completing my MPhil from JNU in linguistics was to teach Hindi and Urdu as foreign languages to the American students. I worked for American government for 8 years teaching Hindi and Urdu to the American students. And I don't have, say, I studied Hindi as a subject up to class 12 and Urdu only certificate of proficiency. So what was it that I could do better? And I was known for being a good teacher. And even in America, you must have heard that Bangla, Tamil, Telugu, Hindi, Urdu, those languages are taught to Americans, and they most of them they become very proficient because the pass mark is 80. Just so it's not an easy task, and almost all of them become very proficient, very good in these foreign languages. But what happens in our own country, where we have accepted English as an Indian language, but then we do not kind of do everything in English in real life situations. So what is it? So all this prompted me to think, and then of course I had the support of linguistics, the degrees that I earned in linguistics and research that I have done at the NCRT and later also at university. So all that kind of gave me some ideas how we can practice all these theories in real life. So each of the topics that are there in the
आवाज
language
नहीं आ रहा
education. आवाज नहीं आ रहा? हेलो? ये
No,
तो
no, we can hear you.
हाँ ठीक है okay. So what happens? So given the situation where we are in, so each of these topics in language education will consume at least 1 hour. Like you talk about output, input, comprehensible input, monitor theory, second language, first language, learning, acquisition, bilingual, and then the mental lexicon, language acquisition device. I need at least 1 hour for each of those aspects. But now, since our goal is to think of what can be done to make the English users, learners of SKMU University become proficient so that they can become employable. They can use English in real life and they can compete with others so that they become empowered. So I have selected, only say 4 items. Kinika, Mike,
એટલે કહું ને એટલે સાદીમ તો મારી ઠીક છે ગરવરાય લડકા બજે લેકિન
Mike,
3 લાખમાં ગાડી ભેજી હતી એટલું આરી સ્કોર્પિયો અને આપણે એટલે બેટા
माइक म्यूट कीजिए किसी का माइक म्यूट कर दीजिए. हाँ, ओके.
બાદો કહાલીએ कि ठीक છે હવે ઈ લડકી છે શાદી લાવલી કરો કે
ये कन्वर्सेशन आ रही है किसी की, बंद कीजिए.
Sorry for the interruption. I request the technical team to look into the matter and
Mute all except,
mute the mic.
Yeah. Okay. Now it's all right. So Professor Mohanty has kind of, it was a little long, but he has outlined the foundation for where we have to move. Very important points he has raised, and we have to take care of that. And also, in the concept note, and when Professor Vinod Kumar Jha talked about it, he has also outlined, which is of course based on the ideas of Professor Minz. And so now I'll elaborate upon that, and let's look into what are the weaknesses, where we have failed, what we could not do in our school education, and also at the education at the level of college and university, that there is this discrepancy where we cannot become proficient in English language. So number one is that Professor Mohanty already hinted at that language grammar remains in the brain. It's in our head. So what has happened, number one, is that we thought, the teachers, the educational planners, the practitioners, that since other subjects have something visible, they have some content, sociology, political science, history, they'll have something to see, mathematics, something to see. But in language, we have nothing to see because language is there in the head and we speak and it evaporates in the air. So nothing is there. So in the beginning, say 60, 70 years ago, we followed the old method of Greek and Latin tradition, that grammar is everything, and or even Sanskrit tradition, that grammar is the language. That was the biggest mistake that we made. So what English teachers or any second language teachers thought, that English or other second languages must have something visible. And what could that be? The grammar. So we printed grammar, then we had dictionaries, but actually in our brain, language, the grammar and dictionary go together. The words themselves hide everything, all the information, the phonological, the morphological, the syntactic, the semantic rules, everything is concealed in the words. There in the brain, the grammar and words are not separated. It is only the maturity and other aspects, memory, that helps us become more proficient and better users of languages at different levels. Otherwise, they are together. So what is important is that we have, say, about 100, say, billion neurons in the brain and about 130 trillion synapses, and they keep communicating. So what do they communicate in? They communicate in electrochemical impulses. And so there are two aspects there, that neurons communicate with each other, and also the neurons, the brain also interacts with outside the head, the world outside it. This is technically known as, so we have knowledge of the language system, the language that is stored in our neurons, and the knowledge of the world, that is how the brain interacts with the world. And what we have done in second language teaching, that we always only focus on what is the language, the knowledge of the language system, and not interaction of brain with the world, where culture is there, context is there, the maturity is there, prior experience is there, stories are there, needs are there. So that is what we made a mistake. And also another important thing that we have not paid focus on is that there are three aspects of language. It's not only the utterances that we make or what we write when we write poems or stories or novels and drama. No, written language is not everything. Actually, written language is a representation of the oral language that is stored in the brain, and that is what is reflected on the paper when we write. So there are three aspects of language. One is the abstract aspect. We call it the propositional level, propositions, the ideas, the concepts, the thoughts, and second is the sentences, and third is the utterance. So either we focus on the sentences and also on utterances, but we forgot the propositions. So at the propositional level, as SKMU slide just now showed us, that everyone smiles in the same language, and the same is true for a language. Everyone thinks alike. Our ideas, concepts are alike, almost similar. And that is very abstract, and it is not governed by language, not a particular language or no language. It doesn't have any language, and that is very important aspect in language teaching. Second is second level is that of sentence, and sentences are also abstract. They are not spoken. They are there in the brain, but sentences are tied to a particular language. And third is the utterance, whether written utterances or the spoken utterances, and they are again tied to a particular language, and they are the physical aspects of language. We can see them, we can hear them. When we write, we can see them. When we speak, we can hear them. So it's not enough that we always take care of only utterances, or we take care of sentences which are abstract and at the level of competence, and we talk about grammar. Grammar itself is abstract. And as Prof. Mohanty has rightly pointed out, that grammar is there. The moment language is there, grammar is there. It doesn't have to be printed. We cannot, the grammar itself is language actually, so you don't have to separate it. So, and then the second thing, the lack that is there, something that we lack in our school education and university education in terms of language education, is that we think that mother tongue and second language are operating at the same level. They have the approaches should be same, the methods should be same. No, in L1, the mother tongue, what happens? The child already has a language acquisition device, that is a blueprint, a universal grammar in her brain, and when she receives input from her parents, the caretakers, friends, etc., then that grammar, the blueprint of grammar is activated, and she acquires language. The blueprint is there, the grammar rules are there, but it has to be activated. But in second language, the child who learns a second language and who comes in school after she has learned the mother tongue, the acquisition doesn't happen that way as in mother tongue, because she doesn't get any input in the second language or foreign language. So in mother tongue, since the child is already proficient in listening and understanding and speaking, she has to master the reading and writing skills, and also the finer aspects of grammar and vocabulary, culture, fine. And but in second language, the child doesn't hear, she doesn't get any input in the second language, so she has to first begin with listening and speaking. So she has to first listen to, she has to get the input of the oral language, and she has to make use of it, so that by using that language in listening and speaking, the language is stored in the brain, in the long-term memory, and later on she can make use of it. So that we ignore. We teach second language as if we are teaching the mother tongue. More emphasis on reading and writing. That's why, as in your concept note also it is highlighted, that the students at college and university level, they are good. They can listen. They have passive understanding of English. They can read on their own. Passively, they can listen to something and understand. But when it comes to production, that is, write something on their own or speak something on their own, they cannot do it. So this is what we have to correct and think of when we are planning to have a module or a foundation course in second language, that is English speaking course or English learning course. Another thing that is there is that there is difference between child learning a second language and adult learning a second language. So what happens, by the time the students are in class 11 or 12 as adults, they have already developed the cognitive concepts. So their cognition, the cognitive development has already happened. But in the case of child, the cognitive development is weak. So we also work on that. But when they grow up, they have become teens or adolescents or adults, then they have already mastered the conceptual things. The concepts has already developed. And also, the next thing is that as child, they need to know certain words. See, this is what happens in bilingualism. That in brain, the two systems of vocabularies are stored separately. So as child, we have to store two different words for the same concept. So child is developing the concept as well as she has to learn the facts about language, the facts about life, the words, that how certain concept, certain idea can be expressed using which word, which terms in first language and in second language. But by the time she has become adult or adolescent, the concepts have already developed. So concepts you don't have to teach. You have to teach the vocabulary and the words, different words, that for the one concept, which words can be used. So they have to master later the grammar and vocabulary in a different term. Not like memorizing the rules of grammar or memorizing the synonyms, antonyms, idioms of English or other second language grammar, not that way. So what I'm emphasizing is that as a child, we have to master the declarative knowledge, the given facts, that what is this, what is that, why this, why, how is something done. But when we become adults, we have to become, the procedural knowledge have to become more advanced. So we have to convert the declarative knowledge, knowledge about facts, into procedures. We have to make that knowledge habits, automatic, so that when the situation arises, we can use that knowledge in real life situation. It's like the famous linguists, they have given examples as see, you cannot drive a car if someone tells you that what is steering, where the brake is, where accelerator is, and how the fuel goes. Just by knowing the facts, you cannot drive a car. You cannot play chess or you cannot play cricket by just watching the cricket match on the TV, or someone telling you what is a short length or full length, or what is like a good length ball, etc. You cannot play cricket. So same is true for languages. By learning the rules of grammar, what is past tense, what is past perfect, what is present perfect, what is synonym, what is antonym, what is transitive verb, what is intransitive verb, or different words if you learn, that doesn't make you use the language. So that will come from when you actually use it. And very famous linguists have already said that, see, language resides in its use. We use grammar, grammatical rule, to do something in real life. It's not for becoming a linguist. It has to be done, used in real life situation. I'll give you quickly two, three examples. For example, see, we teach in schools and even in colleges that the difference between past tense, present perfect, and past perfect. But you never find that what are the situations in which these three aspects differ, how they can be used. So if you have a situation, instead of just teaching the rule, if you have two, three, four paragraphs or simple short stories or essays or some video or some audio where they see, for example, story like how Titanic drowned, what was the accident. So for example, if they see a sentence that by the time the rescue arrived, the Titanic had sunk. Now, see, they can see the use of arrive, past tense, and also had sung, the past perfect. So it's for certain use that if there are two incidents, two events, then the past perfect is one that refers to something deeper. That there are two aspects, and one has already happened, and the other one happens later. Similarly, the present perfect, how it is used in real life. That is, something happened in the past, but it carries on. It's sorry, it carries on the effect on the next event. Like I have already seen the film, so I saw the film, and that about that I am talking now. So a past action that happened in past, but that has some influence, some effect on the present. So that is present perfect. But we are never taught grammar like that. In those situations, the sentences are separately given that convert present perfect into past perfect into simple perfect, and like that. Take another example. We also have grammar. We have active and passive. So we are given that what is active and passive, what will the form of passive will be, and how you convert active into passive, you convert passive into active, but we never teach or never work on and make them understand that passive is needed in real life when the focus is on the object, the focus is on the action, when for some reason we cannot talk about the doer, we cannot talk about the subject, but the action has become important. The doer, not the doer, but the result is more important. Like, oh, you did not get the check, your check will be sent, because you do not know who will write the check and who will send the check. This book was written by Premchand. So we do not see him writing it. The book was written because we are talking about the book, not about the writer who authored it. So see, that is not there. So what we gain from this kind of what I said, that there has to be a different grammar, whether in school or in college, that is pedagogical grammar, the andrological grammar, different grammar. And pedagogical grammar has to be different. See, descriptive grammar is for the linguists. So linguists know that we have certain theory that how negation works in Hindi and how negation works in English, how negation works in Bangla, how interrogative markers work in different languages. This is not for the users, not for the practitioners. So what will the pedagogical grammar contain? The purpose of pedagogical grammar is to promote the insight about second language, promote the insight about the second language, that how the second language structures are different from the first language, and what are the idiosyncrasies, what are the irregularities, so and how that can be mastered, how those aspects are different from my language, and how we can focus on that. So the goal of pedagogical grammar is to make the learners sensitive, make them aware, make them see, make them notice the gaps that their own language and the gaps that exist between their own language and the second language, Bangla and English, how Santali is different from English. So, as I briefly hinted, that we already have a grammar of Santali, Ho, Khadiya, Mundari, Bangla, Odia in our mind. As children, we do not learn when at the age of 4 or 5 that what is noun, what is concrete noun, what is abstract noun, what is transitive verb, intransitive verb. So we learn it and we have already mastered these concepts. So why again teach these things in schools and colleges? Sorry. Okay, so why we teach that? So that is a big mistake, that we take the grammar and Martin type grammar, which is for the linguists, for the grammarians, not for the learners. So that has to be different. So when you take care of having a course on English proficiency, then we also have to think of a different grammar. And also, grammar has to be different for second language to be used in school. It doesn't have to replicate the mother tongue grammar. That is for different purpose, not to be used by the language users, the people who are learning second language. Another thing that is important is That I talked about language acquisition device. See, mental lexicon. So what has happened there? That I talked about converting declarative knowledge into procedural knowledge. So what are the ingredients of that? How does it happen? So by teaching facts, that this is noun, that is verb, this is adjective. Adjective comes before, say, noun in English. As predicate, it can come after it. As attributive, it can come before it. That is learning about the English language, not the language. So how do you convert that declarative knowledge into procedural knowledge? So there are two aspects in that. One is the input, and second is the output. That is very important. And whether school education or college education, we have not taken care of these things. Everything is there in writing. And the teacher, because teacher herself is not proficient in English, so she'll duplicate the same thing. Teacher is the same as the student, especially in schools. And at college level, what happens at university level? The teachers focus on literature. For teaching English, they think literature is English. No, literature is one of the aspects of use of language. Literature is not the language. Literature is one use. So all the time we focus on literature, and in school, all the time we focus on grammar and words. But now, what happens because of that? So we always focus on declarative knowledge, facts, facts, facts. Input, which is about the language, not how this can be used in real life situation. So that also needs to be changed in whether in school or in college. Another thing that is very important is that is so input. Now there are theories. Input has to be comprehensible, given by Krashen. That if you the input has to be slightly higher than the current level of the child. If you in college teach about noun, this is verb, this is adjective, they already know that. In Santali, Bundari, Kadiya, Ho, Odia, Bangla, they are very proficient. They have been using it. So why teach that? So that remains below their level. It will not become comprehensible. That means this kind of knowledge, this kind of input, which is much below the level of the student, will not go into long-term memory. For short-term memory, fine. So they'll understand in class. When it comes in exam, they can memorize it 2 3 days before or the previous night, and they can answer it. But it has this information has not become part of their long-term memory. And how does something become part of long-term memory? That is by practice. So, and there are theories that unless a word or a construction is heard, used, seen 5 to 7 times, it doesn't become part of long-term memory. And what happens in our school and colleges? We see a construction, a lesson, a word one day, and next day it is gone. We do not repeat it. We do not practice that word. The students do not get chance to talk about that construction. They don't use it in their sentences. They don't write something where these words and constructions have been used. So because of that, so input doesn't become comprehensible. And as Krashen says, this kind of input becomes only a monitor. So you have given them, bombarded them with so many words and grammar rules that the learner, when it comes to using the language, English or any second language, she's all the time afraid. She's watching her language. Oh, will it be right or not? And she has to recall the rule. Oh, when the passive will be used, or what will be the structure of passive. So since this knowledge has not become procedural knowledge, it has not become automatic, it has not become a habit. They have to recall everything, and that there is the point where the students lag, because all the time they are monitoring they're watching their language. Will this be right or wrong? Which word? And that's why they need translation. They first think in mother tongue, then they translate, recalling the grammar rules, the words, and they cannot do anything when it comes to writing and speaking. So that is very important. And second thing is that I have covered that. So next thing is that input, comprehensible input is not only thing. We have to have interactional input. See, because comprehensible input, what Krashen talks, that happens before the learning starts. It is given that your text is modified, your teacher's language is modified when she speaks, so it's already there. But what happens when the learner is learning? What happens when the learner is producing language, when she is making use of the language? So the learner has to interact. So comprehensible input, one thing, and then interactional input. But in our courses, in our classes, there is no scope for interactional input. The everything is contained in the textbook or the literature book. So teacher only talks, talks, talks. The students do not have to interact. There is no chance for them in the classroom or outside of classroom, the homework or through internet, through Facebook or through email, they never get chance to use these rules and words what they have learned themselves. So, and it is very important. Unless they interact, they will not get the feedback that whether my communication is taking rightly or not, or what I say is correctly understood or not, what I have written is correctly understood or not, was that perfect or not. So feedback is also necessary. So you have to have input and then feedback from the other students and also from the teachers or for whom the child is speaking or writing English or any second language. But all these things are missing in our education system, whether in school or in college. And third thing is output. Output is very important. So see, output gives again chance to the students to see, get the feedback and see the differences, see the gaps, metacognitive skill. They become aware that where I failed, where I made mistake, where my classmates were better, and where what I lack, where I need to focus on what aspects of language, English language, I have to pay more attention to, what I have to notice. So all these things come under if there is output, focus on output, then only these things can happen. And output is again lastly related to practice. So it's not enough that in classroom you ask them what is the antonym of good. No, that's not enough. They have to use good and bad in paragraphs, in sentences, in discourse, in essays, in their letters that they write on new topics. Then they can watch the gaps and they can improve upon these things. So attention, noticing, input, output, and a lot of practice. And also more focus on speaking and writing. And we don't have the scope for that because our teacher language learning programs focus mostly on literature, grammar, and words. So we have failed in converting the declarative knowledge, that is, the knowledge about the facts of a language. We have not converted that. We do not teach in a way that this knowledge is converted to procedural knowledge, the knowledge of grammar, the words, how to make use of them, the collocations. They don't become habitual. It doesn't become a skill so that they don't have to recall each and every steps of English language that they have learned through grammar and vocabulary. That is the main reason why our students at college level fail in becoming proficient and do everything autonomously, automatically in English or any second language. Now, two things, and then I'll conclude. That is Professor Jha and Professor Minz also. They talked about a very important aspect, and even PanchananMohanty sir has also hinted about it. Is that see, once what has happened, the concepts have already been formed in schools, and they have already learned some grammar and some vocabulary. So, a form of interlanguage, the grammar, which is neither like their mother tongue completely nor like English, has become fossilized. They have become strong. Their brain has become kind of say very hardwired for that. Whatever mistakes they were making, whatever their ideas was how to use a grammar rule in which situation, all that has become fossilized. So everything, whether their strength or weaknesses, that has become hardwired. It is there already when they're in school. So how can either you change or no modify that in college? That's a big challenge, but it can be done. Why? Because I've already hinted at, I did not discuss it in detail, that adult learners have some certain advantages. They know more about the world. They have more advanced metacognitive skill. They know what is right, what is wrong, how to use it, or they can use their computational skill in language. That okay, this should go with that. They can notice their gaps, their weaknesses, and they can improve upon that. What children cannot do because their frontal cortex has not developed so well. It doesn't develop so well until the age of 14 or 15 in girls, and in boys not before 18 or 19 years of age. So what has it become? All these mistakes, their shortcomings has become strengthened, very, very hard, so they cannot change it. So we do need to take care of the school education, languages in our school. So we have to teach and learn second languages, not like mother tongues. So our grammar has to change, our vocabulary has to change. This is not the time. If I am part of developing the module, then or some other time, I can discuss that in detail. That see, you can have what in our textbooks we find that for active passive there will be 10 sentences, and those sentences will be unrelated. So as adult learners, they don't understand this, don't see the connection between form and meaning. That is very important for adult learners. You cannot teach them like child, where more focus has to be there on words, because they have to first know the facts about the language, and later on when they go to class 8 9, then they work on procedural knowledge more, procedural memory more when they are in higher classes. So see, all these things are very important, that you have to have a pedagogical grammar in place, not the traditional grammar, the linguistic grammar that we already have in place. You need to change that. Then a lot of things about the input, comprehensible input, and chances for the students to interact. And that's why, see, what has actually happened, we have the theory, we have the policies, everything is in place. The missing link is we have not been able to connect these theories to the real life, the practitioners, how to bring those theories into practice. We know, and there comes the role of university teachers. See, you have to do research, you read more, you talk more, you discuss more about these things, and you have to take a proactive role in providing this kind of material for teaching either English or some other language of the region. So it can be Hindi, Odia, Bangla, Santali, Mundari, Ho, Khadiya, and Kurukh, my own language, for which I worked on PhD, and that's very close to my heart. So I think it's better that it's a big topic. You cannot summarize all these things in 30, 40 minutes. So I hope that I have covered a few important aspects that are important when we talk about second language education, and how the teaching of language at school can be connected. We have to improve that also. We have to modify that system as well, the school system, and then our college, university level education of English can be better. And few things I have left intentionally. That is a teacher component. That is very important. And lastly, I'll conclude connecting it to what Professor Mohanty said. That see, he hinted at it actually. Teaching grammar is the most easy thing. Anybody can teach grammar. For teaching grammar, you do not need to know the language, because it's talking about the language. What is noun in Arabic, or where the verb comes in Arabic, it will come in the first place. Okay, if it is first person, so what is the pronoun? It's ana. You can just read, memorize, and deliver a lecture on grammar. Anybody can do that. But for the students or the learners to actually know the language is to use the language. So grammar is not required. So if we make certain changes in our curriculum and syllabus where some linguistic components are there, something on language education is also there, and even the English teachers have to know that literature can be exploited for teaching language, English language. It doesn't have to only talk about what happened in Victorian age, and what Shakespeare talked about, how his sonnets differ from the poems of Wordsworth. No, that's not the only thing. The teachers have to know how to exploit literature even for teaching, learning languages. And this is where, this is the last point that I'll make. We lot of time we talk about contextualization. And what happens, we have translations into English, or in Hindi, we'll have certain poems written by some foreigners in English or some other language. We translate it, and we change names of the people, the stories. Like instead of say John, we'll have something like Prabhu or Anil in Hindi and other languages, and we think that this has contextualized. No, that is not contextualization. Contextualization is that the concept and the culture, the society, the context, that has to be familiar to the learners. And what happens, and that is why it is important, as I already mentioned, that the whole game of language learning is converting short-term memory into long-term memory. Store all the information in the long-term memory and make it procedural, habitual, like a skill. And so context, if the context is not familiar, if not, it's not related to their culture, if they to their society, it will not be stored in the memory. Why? Because I'll just quickly point out. See, episodic memories, when you talk about something in a new language, what happens? Episodic memory is stored in the language in which you first heard it, used it. So if in class 9 you had some incident, some episode, and that was done in the medium of Santali, when you repeat the same incident in English, it won't be same. It will be very difficult. So we have to give the chance to the students to store episodes. No, the language, grammar, and words connected to certain events, certain episodes, and that has to be contextualized in their situation. That means, take if you talk about Wordsworth and Shakespeare, Victorian age, or some other African literature, what happens, allegory and alliteration. No, that is too foreign for them. It doesn't happen in real life. So in the beginning, you have to focus on something else. And when they have already become proficient, they can make good use of English in reading, writing, speaking, listening. Then you move on to these final aspects. The last thing, another mistake that we make that is very important is that contextualization. See, language is heavily decontextualized. Language, no language is always contextualized. Only the initially in the beginning things are contextualized, but most of a language is decontextualized. That means, see, you cannot all the time have something in front of you and then you talk about it, something in front of you and then you write about it. No, most of the time we talk about something or someone which is not present in your vicinity. So it's highly decontextualized. And that's why languages have been given by nature or our society very fewer words, very fewer constructions. You can write the core vocabulary of a language, even like so-called very advanced language like English has only about 20,000 root words, only 20,000 words. And other words are associated with this. We can have, say, simple, simply, simpler. We have good, better, best. We can have success, successful, unsuccessful, succeed. But if you count the roots, it won't have more than 20,000 root words. Sanskrit is very much advanced, and Sanskrit and Greek, but they have at the most 30,000 root words, and other words are woven around those root words. So you can write that. Any grammar of any language can be written on two pieces of paper. You can write the whole grammar actually on two sides of this paper, any language, English or Sanskrit, the whole grammar. And this is what we know Panini has done. Only in say a few sutras, he talks about everything about grammar. Chomsky, the native grammarians, we can write the whole English grammar in just one sheet of paper. Why we have so thick Wren and Martin grammar for that? So this is it's very important that language is decontextualized. We have very few words. Redundancy is there. One word may mean many things. It will collocate with certain other words, give something else. And idioms, so on. So so this is the time that and Professor Minz has already taken a step, which will be followed by other say teachers at the university, and it's a very good step. Many states have done it, but it's not up to the mark. So let's see that Jharkhand does it, and especially SKMU does it for the first time. That we have a module, we have a foundation course where actually all these things have been taken care of, and we really see to it that we make the learners, adult learners at university, uh, proficient in English, and even that will help the English teachers, because your teachers only will go to school. Those who graduate from university, from your college, they only will go to school and teach. So that way, you have a very important role to play, and it's very good and very timely that SKMU has taken this step, and will certainly succeed because your intentions are good. And as Rabindranath Tagore and Rabindranath Tagore, the two brothers, have said all the time, it's not enough to be, say, teacher or say author or painter, but you have to be a good human being. And good human being means to have good intentions, good desires for the well-being of everyone, and that you have the intention and the dedication and the will, so will certainly succeed. So with those words, I conclude my lecture, short lecture. It was a little longer, and I would like to have more questions, because I can go on talking about, this is such a vast area. For one thing, you can talk about input, you can talk about 2 hours or 3 hours at a time. So let's have some questions, and then I can explain if they have certain queries. Thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you, Professor Mishra. You have discussed very diverse issues and informed us about sort of a roadmap to proceed with in future. And I'm very sure the future actions would depend on the advice that you have given in your lecture. I am very sure that the participants would have some queries. I request them all to post their queries in the chat box, whether in Zoom or in YouTube, and we'll be able to take them up at the end of the program. We with this lecture, we are approaching the end of the first session of today's webinar. And at this point, it is my pleasure to invite Professor Dr. Dhruv Narayan Singh, Registrar, SKM University, to propose a vote of thanks. Over to Professor Dhruv Narayan Singh.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Am I audible? मेरी आवाज जा रही है?
Yes, sir.
Honorable Vice Chancellor of SKM University, Professor Sonajharia Minz, Honorable Director of CIIL, Professor D.G. Rao, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor H.P. Sharma, eminent speakers, Professor PanchananMohanty, Professor Awadesh Mishra, Professor Imtiaz Hasnain, Professor Rajneesh Arora, Dr. Tariq Khan, my colleagues at the university, and all those who are connected with the webinar today. I extend my heartiest thanks to all of you for participating in the inaugural session of the webinar. We had the opportunity of listening to the two great linguists of India, Professor Mohanty and Professor Mishra. And we are now looking forward to the lectures of Professor Hasnain and Professor Arora. Thanks you all for making today's webinars a great success. Thanks to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So now,
thank you for your kind words. I request the technical team to announce when we can resume for the second session of the day. I request the technical team to announce the time when we can resume for the second session.
Yes, sir. Just a minute. I am announcing the time.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and we can rejoin the session from 1:10. Till then, we will be available online. All of you be online, and you can all mute yourself and switch off your videos, and we can rejoin back at 1:10. Thank you.
इधर हम ये नहीं करेंगे है ना। नहीं 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 नवीन भाई बा कान धरे जानते हैं इस उम्र में ये सब धंधा इसको फोन करिए ये करिए डरे से कौन किसका कनेक्शन कट जाएगा कौन गंजी पीट के आ जाएगा इसे अभी है 1-1.5 घंटा और है सीधे बोलने लगेगा तो बाप रे भी रजिस्ट्रार बोला 2 लाइन बड़ा कड़क अंग्रेजी बोला एकदम धन्यवाद ज्ञापन भी किया है फर्स्ट सेशन का बढ़िया बोला एकदम देखिए आपका हाथ
झा सर हेलो झा सर हेलो
Yes, I am speaking. Hello.